Give us your reaction to this verdict.
We're disappointed. We respect the jury's verdict. They took a lot of time to come to the verdict. We wish it would have been different, of course, but they certainly came to their decision. We respect that decision. We'll explore our options now post-trial and go from there.
How difficult of a case was this from a defense perspective, considering he admitted to having Molly Tippett's body in his trunk and the DNA was there?
Very difficult, of course. I mean, anytime you have a client who gives a statement like he did, and the fact that there was DNA evidence in the trunk, and the fact that he led them to the body, I mean, it makes it extraordinarily difficult, absolutely.
Considering the statewide attention to this, are you, I'm trying to think of how to put this, but are you convinced that it was ever possible to find a jury? Do you believe they were impartial here?
In this case, we're very pleased that the jury took the time that they did to look at the evidence and to deliberate in this case. You know, it would be impossible to find a jury that hadn't heard about this case, and that wouldn't matter even if we had the ability to leave the state of Iowa. We would, which we don't, but we wouldn't be able to find someone, a group of people that haven't heard from this case. We're really pleased with the time that has been spent with jury selection and the time that was given to this case. So we're disappointed with the outcome, but that's what it is.
What are those potential options for you that you're mulling at this point?
Well, of course, we'll look at post-trial motions. You know, we'll go back and look at any evidentiary issues that were raised during the trial. And of course, we had that issue on the motion to suppress that was litigated prior to trial, and of course that'll be looked at on appeal.
It's no secret that we disagreed with Judge Yates's suppression ruling. We sought discretionary review with the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court denied that. Because we will file an appeal on Mr. Bahena's behalf, the Supreme Court will have the opportunity to review those claims and to make a decision.
Do you have an estimate on how long it will take to file that appeal?
Well, the sentencing's on July 15, so we have 30 days from that day. So you're looking at end of July, first part of August.
Can you talk us through the decision to have your client testify?
Well, the decision to have him testify wasn't as difficult as a lot of people want to make it sound. I mean, we had a situation where a client gave a statement, and he had her DNA in the trunk, and he led him to the body. That's all pretty incriminating evidence. And from the very first day we met Mr. Bahena, the story he put forth on the stand was exactly the version of the events he told us going back to August 2018. He had never varied from that version of the events, not one detail. So we had to get something up there, and we thought the jury needed to hear directly from him, especially since they couldn't judge the credibility of him on the video since it was in Spanish. And we had real issues with that interview and how it was conducted. So it really wasn't that difficult of a decision for us.
To clarify, did you say that the account that he gave on the stand is an account that he gave to you in 2018?
Absolutely. He has never varied from that, not one detail.
You know, I think there was speculation that we made some sort of, let's figure out a story. And I mean, if we were going to make something up, we would have came up with something better than that.
Do you worry that it didn't sound credible to the jury?
You know, just the story of Molly Tippett's abduction was a bizarre story in and of itself. So what we thought is that whoever told the tale, whatever tale it was, had to sound credible. And the version of the events given by Mr. Bahena, it had to sound credible coming out of his mouth, whatever it was. So we were more concerned about how he appeared to a jury and how he sounded to a jury. And we didn't spend a whole lot of time preparing him. We wanted him to seem authentic rather than coached. And so we didn't spend, an inordinate amount of time preparing him to testify. We kind of just let him tell his story in a very genuine fashion. So what you saw from him yesterday is really who he is.
One thing that we can agree, and I think everybody can agree on, is that Ms. Tibbetts was someone that did not deserve to be a victim. And the fact that this woman went out for a run and ended up in this cornfield is just bizarre on its own. She was not the type of person that would engage someone in an argument. She's not the type of person that would be hurtful. I think that her choice, even if she thought something bad, would be to be kind. And it doesn't, I think any reason that someone would abduct her and leave her dead in a cornfield is just a bizarre set of facts, no matter what.
You were throughout the case, or throughout the trial, to point fingers towards Mr. Jack, boyfriend. Is that, in your mind, the most likely?
He certainly gave us reason to suspect. Okay. There's a lot of people in this case whose stories didn't check out well enough for us. And that was a problem for us. So can we tell you who did this? No. We can tell you that getting to know Cristhian Bahena, we are very surprised that he would be the kind of person that would commit a crime like this. He is nothing but a soft-spoken, respectful, kind person. And every person we have talked to in the last 2.5 years who has had any interaction with this man echoes that. He's been a delight to represent from a legal standpoint, from a lawyer's standpoint. Has been absolutely no problem.
And another thing I'd point out is his family has been just a delight to work with. I know that there has been some questions from some of you about whether or not his family or why they haven't been at trial. These people are hardworking people, and I will tell you that whenever we meet with the family, we normally have 7 or 8 people in the room that care for him. And these are all people that work hard and have been following this case very closely. The fact that you all have been able to provide this to the public so easily has been beneficial. That this family, they just don't have the resources to take off 2 weeks, but they've been watching closely. We'll be in touch with them as soon as we leave the courthouse, and it has been a pleasure to work with the Bahena family. I have no unkind things to say about any of them, similar to how we feel about the Tibbetts family.
It sounds like you're intending to remain his attorney as he goes through the appeal process. Is there any thought at this point to bring on any additional lawyers to the team?
Not at this point.
You mentioned during the trial when you were, I believe, cross-examining or examining Dalton Jack about phone records. Those, to my recollection, weren't introduced as evidence. Did you have those records? Were you planning on introducing them? If so, why not?
Well, there's evidentiary issues as far as the rules of evidence that don't allow you just to introduce phone records. We did have those phone records. They were about 5,000 pages in length. What we wanted to use them for more than anything was to point out inconsistencies in his story, or stories, I should say, and how it was just kind of a head scratcher to us how he could not recollect the days leading up to his girlfriend's homicide, and that was a problem for us.
Also during your case, you mentioned the
unknown DNA, the unknown fingerprints, are there plans, or are you able to independently test any of that on appeal?
The problem is if we don't have a buccal swab from somebody, it's pretty difficult to do that. There are times that, you know, there's databases that certain people, you know, that are compelled to give a DNA sample. But, you know, if my DNA were in something, or probably yours, it just isn't going to be there. And with this case, again, with the Tibbetts family and with the Jack family, I don't think we have any reason to believe that unless, you know, we had their buccal swab, that it would show up on some sort of a database.
Is there any other evidence that you wish that you could have brought out in the case that, or that maybe you were on the fence about bringing out? What were some of the considerations there?
Go back and look at our motion in limine, and I think you can tell from that. I'm not going to speak any more on that today. But look at our motion we filed right before the case was heard. Our resistance to the motion in limine, I think, will speak for itself as to what we would like to have introduced. There's been other motions filed throughout the case that talked about other evidence that you didn't hear in trial, but I think speaks to perhaps why we were so intent on going after one witness in particular, Mr. Jack.
What about the two masked men? Were efforts ever made to locate them?
It's like trying to prove there's not a Santa Claus. I mean, we don't know who those persons could be. Remember, our client lives really out in the middle of a very rural location. And we kind of tried to link it up the best we could through the people who we thought would have some sort of motive, and that's where we went with some of the testimony, but that's very difficult to establish.
We're fast approaching 3 years since this happened. Do you think timing of this trial played a part in some of the witness testimony and the verdict today?
A little bit. I think it also helped as far as 2018 was a much different time than we have today. 2018 was, in my opinion, very conflictual, very difficult time for an immigrant. If we'd have gone to trial within 90 days, like a speedy trial right would have allowed him to have, I think it would have been very difficult for him. You know, I think the passage of time has allowed some of the pain to heal a little bit, let all of us kind of just take a breath and be a little more pragmatic in our decision making.
We don't want to keep the family and everybody, so maybe one more question.
They said it'll be 10-15 minutes.
Okay.
Can you explain Mr. Bahena's, status as far as citizenship or immigration, or how his status, you know, does he stay in the country until appeals are exhausted, or do you have a sense of that?
He'll serve whatever sentence he receives, and then they'll take care of that issue.